I am Bunnell Ansley, an active real estate agent and founder of Ansley Real Estate, Christie's International, an award-winning Atlanta-based real estate brokerage that did over $3 billion in sales last year.
And I'm Chris Tuff, one of the first advertisers to work directly with Mark Zuckerberg in 2006. I've since gone on to be the best-selling author of The Millennial Whisperer and Save Your Asks.
And this is Brokering Billions. This podcast is about uncovering the hustle, perseverance, mindset, and tricks that are used by the top real estate agents in the country to help you take your business to the next level.
In today's episode, we are going to interview one of the foremost experts on networking and teams. His name is Mo Bunnell, and he is the CEO of the Bunnell Idea Group. He has trained over 25,000 professionals and has even trained Bunnell's group at the Ansley Group. So in today's episode, Mo is going to take listeners through what are the three most important things that they can do to take their networking to the next level. This is grounded in real data, but with things that we can do immediately following the podcast. So tune in today.
Here we go, guys.
Happy New Year.
It's 2023. I'm Bunnell.
And I'm Chris Tuff.
We are in the Atlanta offices of Ansley Real Estate, Christie's International. Today, we've got a non-real estate agent. This is our second one after we had Paul Ollinger. I've done 3 or 4 deals with Mo Bunnell, who is a friend of mine, best-selling author. We're going to get into his books that he's written. He's also trained, a large percentage of our agents here at Ansley. And we're going to showcase what systems he has, what he's done. And agents, it's going to really, really benefit you guys.
Yeah, I mean, and Mo, what I appreciate so much of what you've done is you practice what you preach, right? You've scaled your business accordingly. You've trained 25,000 people, professionals, right? You've been able to actually take the stuff that you're going to teach agents today and you've applied it to your own business. And what better places of expertise than to hone in on building our teams, right? And the sales side, the prospecting side. And, so many people going into the new year, they feel stuck. They want to take action. And so, Mo, welcome to the show. We're so excited to have you.
Well, Bunnell and Chris, I think so highly of both of you that this is going to be this trifecta of crazy ideas. And I think the audience is going to get a lot out of this. It's going to be a lot of fun.
I completely agree. One thing that's big, you don't think that being great at business development, you don't believe you're born with that, do you?
No, not at all. And the science backs this up, Bunnell. And I think here's the thing. Somebody can look at you. I'm going to get really personal. Here's Bunnell. He's literally brought in billions of dollars of business. Bunnell, you are bigger than life. People want to be you. You're everywhere. And we'll decode that a little bit. Somebody could look at you and say, oh man, I could never do it like Bunnell does. And almost like wilt. The science does not back that up. People are not born with it. There's this researcher out of Florida State, before he passed away about 1.5 years ago, he was the worldwide expert on expertise. Spent 30 years studying expertise, everything, chess masters, violin players, business professionals, sport athletes, everything. And what he found irrefutably, his name's Dr. K. Anders Ericsson, and what he found irrefutably is that any complex skill is both learned and earned. We can look at somebody that's at the top of their game and think, oh, they were born with it. But no, just, he had the gift of gab. He has a big personality, whatever. But I know you, Bunnell, and I know you sweat every meeting. I know you kill yourself if you ever lose anything, which isn't very often, but years ago, you lost a couple things. It's not often, but you change yourself, you learn, you're always striving to get a little bit better. And it's that constant climb that you've had over your entire life. that has created the Bunnell today. And people just don't see that. So they assume you're born with it. The research says it's hogwash.
Well, that's really interesting. And I've also read, and everybody knows this fact, right? God, you need to have 10,000 hours, right?
Yep.
Or whatever.
That's Anderson.
Expert.
That's his research. That's the guy. Malcolm Gladwell popularized it, but it was Dr. Erickson that came up with it. Yeah, keep going.
And with that, right? So, the new agents like Chris to my left here is a new real estate agent with me on my team. He's got 1 hour into being a real estate agent, right? So, but I do think, again, that Chris is born with that, gift of speaking to people and making people feel comfortable.
Yep.
But what you're getting at with this research is, agents out there across the country that's listening to this, if you don't have that or don't think that you've had that or grown up with that, golly, there's still a way to achieve that. And Mo, is that what you teach?
That's exactly what we teach. So we think of it like this conceptually. Let's say become a great real estate agent or a great lawyer or a great consultant or whatever professional you are listening to this. Let's say that to be truly great, you've got to have 100 micro skills. So think of like a 100-piece jigsaw puzzle.
Sure.
Well, Bunnell, you really were born with a lot, my guess is. Your ability to connect with anybody, to walk into a room and be sort of the life of the party kind of person. You might have been born with 9 of the 100 puzzle pieces. Maybe Chris has a different 9, but nobody has all 100. So I want to be clear. What I'm not saying is that some people aren't born with a little bit more, but nobody's born with any more than a small fraction of what they need. And if somebody's a little bit more of an introvert, very different than you two, that's okay. Maybe they call on accountants. Maybe they call on people a little bit more like them. Maybe they do a little more thoughtful outreach on email versus in person. That's okay. That can work for the right clientele. So I guess the nut of that is, while some people are born with a little more than others, nobody's born with much more than a small percentage. And it is effort and it's deliberate practice that makes you great.
I mean, you're focusing on the key processes to make your skill set work. And that rolls out to, accelerate client acquisition. And client acquisition is getting a listing, getting a buyer to work with you, et cetera.
Yeah. Well, let's contextualize that into what's happening right now, right? People are hesitant to sell or buy houses, right? And we have this opportunity right now, right, Mo, for all of the agents listening to start to take action on this business, like starting that process.
Yes.
Right. And so what is it that you would hone in on as one of the greatest tactics for people to start practicing given the environment?
Oh man, that's great. So let me share a little bit more research and I'll give you the tactics. So some research came out of McGraw-Hill's research group. So the big publishing company, they've got a research arm. And in the 1980s, in the recession, big recession in the early 80s, they found that people that advertised in the recession outperformed their peers during the recession, but also for 3 years afterwards. So if we've got economic headwinds, that's the time to run around and win market share. What everybody does is like, oh yeah, people aren't buying and selling as much as they do, so I'm going to not work as much.
Play more golf.
You want to work more, because if you're the one out there when times are tough, that's when people remember you later. So when I think of if times are tougher, I think that's when you put more shoulder into it, and because your competition doesn't, and that's when you go out and win market share. So to get to your question around practicality, we think of 3 big things that people need to do to be great at growth. How do you manage your opportunities? How do you manage your relationships? And how do you manage yourself? And I can go into a little more detail on those if you want, but that's sort of
Well, and Mo, just with those 3 things, one thing that you and I've talked about when I've been, in your classroom is authenticity.
Yes.
And having that rolled into these 3 things that you just spoke about. Can you just talk through those 3 things in more detail? Because I think the agents out there would love to understand that.
Well, you're so good at it. And you strive for that. And I've experienced it. Gosh, I've bought or sold, is it 3 houses with you? So I'm not only a trainer, I'm a friend, I'm a client. I'm like, we're all wrapped up in this one. But I would start with this phrase around authenticity. People hate to be sold to, but they love to buy.
Mm.
And boy, let that sink in, audience. People hate to be sold to, but they love to buy. So when we think about creating a bigger book of business, the best thing we can actually do is not run around and sell to people. It's to go out and create more buys. How can we design a delightful, engaging, learning experience for people around the real estate market so that we start teaching them before they even hire us, and they learn more from us than they do than the person they actually transacted with last time, and they can't wait to work with you. But no, that's why I hired you. Is you came to our house on the very first sale side, and in 30 minutes I learned more from you than I had learned from however many real estate agents I'd worked with before, because you started teaching me around comps, how we're going to go to market, how we're going to get the best price, how we're going to have the fastest time to close, what the stuff we needed to do right away. Like, I learned so much from you in like 30 minutes that I couldn't wait to actually contract with you, short of the one funny story we've got, because you were teaching me, I was learning, and I was a better person just because of our time together.
And listeners, let me tell you what I learned with the first meeting, going into Mo's house, where he started at a house with me that was $650,000 and ended up with one well in the 3s or 4s millions. But the first house I was at with him, I went through my pitch that I do. And this was, golly, man, this was early in my career, maybe first or second year where I started in the business.
You were like 12 years old or something.
I looked 12. But Mo said, okay, this is all cool stuff. I love your marketing. What's my house worth? Okay, that's the big question that we get. And I said, well, Mo, look, man, your house is worth $650,000. And he says, well, how is it worth that? And how'd you come up with that number? And I said, well, Mo, man, I just know.
That's exactly what you said.
I live in the neighborhood. I just know, like, look, dude, I mean, it's $650,000. And he called me into his office the next day and said, look, man, I like you. You're great. This is great. I want to hire you. But man, you didn't hit all the different quadrants of my brain when you're going through your pitch. You had me with honesty and authenticity and all this stuff, but you missed my whole analytical side of my brain. Now, as we learn more and as I study with Mo, what color is that in your brain? Is that the red or the orange?
Blue. Yeah,
okay, blue side of your brain. That's the analytical side.
Yep.
And I totally whiffed on that. And what I have learned from that and what I've been able to teach over the last 10, 15 years is when a listing agent at Ansley is presenting on getting the job, and we also say, hey, if you're even presenting to your mother, present the same way every time. Don't expect you're going to get a listing. That's first and foremost. But the big takeaway was, man, hit all 4 quadrants of your brain, because you never know who you're going to be sitting across the table from that's getting the information. And now, ever since that meeting, I talk about comps and price per square foot and all these different things that an actuary, because Mo's an actual actuary. I didn't know what an actuary was. Why don't you tell us about what that means? But his IQ is off the charts, and he really wanted this data. So now I'm in a listing presentation, I go full force and give a full presentation relative to all 4 quadrants of the brain. I'd love for you to speak a little bit about that, because I think that is highly important.
Well, without a doubt. And by the way, audience, Bunnell came the very next day to my house with a massive data analysis. And lo and behold, the data showed the house was worth like $650,032. Like, you were within like $1,000. So you actually were right. But I just needed to see the data and the roll up and the comps and the pluses and the minuses and all that stuff. So let's teach everybody this, because it is a game changer. So the best way that you can describe this idea of there's 4 major ways people think. And by the way, there's a bunch of neuroscience behind it. We'll skip over all that so we can get right to practicality. But the best way to teach is there's 2 opposing pairs in the mind. There's analytical versus relationship, and there's big ideas and conceptual stuff versus details. So everybody, when you're talking to somebody about, taking their house to market or even purchasing a house to some extent, but especially around a listing, you want to hit all 4, and you want to ask questions so you can figure out how that potential client is thinking, so that you bias towards the way that they think. So let's talk about it. Analytical versus relational. So analytical, Bunnell covered, which is like data, spreadsheets, comps, pluses and minuses, all the numbers add up, and you're getting to very specific numbers. The data shows that you're right. That's analytical thinking. Some people talk and think in numbers. That's that one. The opposite of that is, do I trust you? Do you have eye contact? Did you help me out when times were tough? Did you stay in touch when I wasn't selling a house? Did you walk around the house and notice that my child, it's going to be hard to do walkthroughs at any given time because I have a young child, and you made some kind of way to make that easier? Like, did you listen? Did you play back? So that's more the relationship side. That's the second way. Then the third and the fourth way are big picture, conceptual versus detailed. The big picture conceptual thinkers really, really love big ideas. They love innovation. They love something new. There you might talk about how you're going to use Instagram or drone flyovers or super cool and sexy things around the marketing of their house that are quite innovative. The opposite of that is super detailed. Gantt charts, plans, steps. These are the 17 things you got to do to get ready. And let me give you dates and timelines around that. So, but no, I can see you got, like, you want to jump in, but those are the four major ways. And if you can hit all four, real estate agents, then you can be listening. And when the potential client starts to ask a bunch of questions about one of those areas, you can dig down and go deep in that one. You're going to win when you talk in the language of the client.
You'll win 100 out of 100 times.
Yep.
And with all the other agents that are top of their game that we've talked to over the last several months, you've got like a Rob Thomas out of Jupiter, who uses technology, right, to be able to get somebody really interested because, oh my God, we're gonna be able to track who's looking on the site and looking who's on your house. We'll be able to call them that second. All these other people are pros in all these different quadrants, but to be a full, complete agent is being great at all four quadrants, well, even if you're not ready to do that.
Well, and I think, you guys are talking about activities that we're not seeing much of, right? Which is the meeting, right? Or people taking action on the website. Everyone's sitting there. A lot of people are sitting there and they're waiting, right? And Mo, I mean, you talk so much about this, but for those that don't necessarily have that networking gene, right? That feel like, they might be more on the introverted analytical side, right? That's not like a Bunnell and I that are more big picture, very extroverted. Like, what is it that you feel like tactically in terms of suggestions of them going out and getting that prospecting in place now so that when people begin taking more action on it, they get those meetings? What is it that you suggest listeners do that they can walk away today and start implementing?
I love it. And this fits in that whole framework of managing opportunities, relationships, and yourself. And we're going to go deep in the relationship column right now. So we think of the deepening relationship in a capital T-shaped graph. So imagine a capital T. There's a big horizontal thing at the top, and then you go deep, in the center. So great marketing hits both elements. The top of the T is, how can I stay top of mind on a periodic basis with a maximum number of people? That's mailings to house, it's social media, it's being involved in your church. It's like anything, like that's at scale. Like, how can I have little touch points? We like to say with your most important folks on a monthly basis at scale. And you want to figure out a way to do that where preferably you're adding some value. A little training videos on YouTube, market trends for people in the marketplace. Hey, here's what housing prices are doing. Something around trying to use social media, mail, or something to stay in front of a lot of people on a periodic basis. That's the top of the T. The middle of the T is super interesting. And Bunnell, I know you're really, really good at this. This is where you take a select few people and you personally contact them. You're going to go really deep with a small number of people. Now, Bunnell, you do this with like hundreds, but for a lot of people, 10 or 12 people is plenty. And for these in real estate, the upright part of the T usually isn't clients. It could be if you know somebody's
These are the
gonna have our house for
multipliers,
sale
right,
soon.
Mo?
It's what?
These are the multipliers, I call them.
Yes, multipliers. We call them strategic partners. You call them multipliers. So they could be anybody from your
Accountants.
hairdresser. They know everybody. It could be financial advisors. It could be accountants. It could be home renovators. It could there's a million of them, but you're trying to have a one-to-many connection with those where through one relationship, if you're the person they're thinking of, because you've added so much value in their life, they're hopefully running across dozens or 100 people a year. They're going to sell a home. They hear about it first. They say, you got to call Bunnell.
Yep.
So
they're your fans.
They're your fans, your raving fans. Yeah, Bunnell, add your technique on that, because I think you do this really intuitively, but most people need to make a list. They need to take 60 seconds and write down on paper, who are my top 10 or 20 multipliers or people that I want to focus on. Your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, look, they're your accountants. They're the guy that cuts your hair, just like you said. I mean, they're the bartender at the expensive restaurant. I mean, those are all guys that have your cards and can speak when they overhear somebody at the bar saying, "Oh my God, I got to find a house." Blah blah blah.
Yep.
Oh my God, have you talked to my buddy? But no, here's his car. This guy's great. He comes in here all the time. Whatever. And the multiplying of getting the word out with your fans is a huge way to build your business. And at a certain point, agents, you have, your sphere. And I kind of say your sphere runs out after you sell $20 million worth of property. Now, sometimes that sphere might be 30 million or 40 million, but once your sphere runs out, you have to grow a really big business, 50 million, 100 million, right? You got to have these multipliers that are out there speaking about you and being fans of yours that continue to be able to sell to strangers. And once you're able to sell to strangers and you start agents getting these calls from people you don't know, hey, I got your name from so-and-so, or, and they might not be referrals from people that you've sold. These come from a whole nother category. And as you call it, straight down the T, Mo.
Yep. The deep
That's
stuff.
really, 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 really start to grow your business.
So Mo, I've got a question that I think you'll enjoy. So, I wrote a book on the art of networking and courtship, which was really, it's more about generating more authentic connection in the world, right? And it's this idea of we all need to, it's called save your asks, ASKS, and that
I've got it in the other room right over here.
There we go, right? I gave you a copy when we met. But one of the things that I think is so important to this period right now is identifying that management of going in and establishing yourself as the expert in this area of real estate, while also first initially getting that relationship and that authenticity piece in place, right?
Yep.
And what does that timeline look like? Can you just give listeners a little bit of an understanding as to how to manage that, right? So at the Blue Ridge Grill, when you're sitting down for lunch, the last thing you want to do is start going in and talking about how much of an expert in real estate, right? There's steps that we need to take first to then save that until the relationship is in place. And then we start to get into more of that nitty gritty. And I mean, once again, watching Bunnell do this, he waits, right? He waits, he creates that relationship. And then when it's time to, Bunnell, when he gets into it, I don't know if you've ever noticed this, Mo, but when he starts talking about real estate, he has this bounce to him, right? And he just gets in his own. I saw him do it in front of the craziest celebrities out in Surf Ranch. And I was like, here goes Bunnell. This is going to be amazing. And he started bouncing. But it wasn't until the second day that we're around all of these crazy, it's the craziest network I've ever been around in my life. And Bunnell had waited he was so patient before he went in to actually then establish himself as that real estate expert. I want you to tell listeners, just given all of your experience, given your breadth of knowledge in the research, how do you manage that?
Yeah, so I'll be super practical and share some research on how we can do this. So three things. One is you've got, and I'm talking to the audience now, Chris, not you or Bunnell, but you've got to write this down. You've got to write down your top relationships. Bunnell has sold billions of dollars. He can do it in his head. He gets a pass. And plus your dyslexia and the way that your brain works, you just do it so natural. Bunnell, you've got a gift for connections without a doubt. Everybody else but Bunnell, You got to write it down. So we call this a protomoi list. I know that sounds like a funny word. It's a Greek word. There's no direct English equivalent, but it roughly means first among equals. Protemoi, protomoi. And first among equals, those are the people that you're going to say, because I only have a limited amount of time, I can't spread it like peanut butter. Who are the people that can be that upright part of the T? Is it 10 people? Is it 30? Pick whatever you want, but think here's your limiting factor. How many people once a month can I add value personally? Sending them an email, seeing how they're doing, send them a TED Talk, having lunch with them, whatever it is. How many people can I do that once a month? And these are what Bunnell calls multipliers. So you got to write down your protomoi list, your first among equals, because without it, you will be reactive. And I want you to be proactive. So that's thing one. Thing two.
And so you think about 10 people. Is that right? I mean,
well, it all depends on who you are.
It depends on who you are. So if you're super extroverted, you might start with 30 or 40. Most people, about 10 is perfect.
Perfect.
And here's the thing to follow up, Chris, if you start with 10 in your first month, you're like, man, I had no problem doing 10. I'm going to up it to 30. Do that. But what most people do, we find, is they start with too many, and then it collapses under their own weight. They want to get real excited. They're going, I'm going to do 100. And then because they only get to 12, they think this didn't work. Well, it's not because it didn't work. It's because you picked too many. So start with a smaller and build. And that creates what some psychologists, the main research here was Dr. Iso Ahola. He found psychological momentum happens when you're starting a new habit, if you start off really easy and you grow from there. So that's part of the reason to start small too. You can always add, it's harder to start too big. So anyway, that's thing one, is write down your relationships. Thing two, there's a researcher named Dr. Diana Tamir that hooks people up to functional MRI machines. It's called fMRI. It measures blood oxygenation in the head, in your brain. It finds out what part of the brain is firing. And this is super cool. She found when people are answering what the scientists call self-disclosing information, SDI, or it's just their personal perspective on something only they know, the pleasure center of their brain's lighting. So imagine when you drink a Red Bull, how you're on fire. That's the pleasure center of the brain fired up. When you're on stimulants is another time when your pleasure center is firing. There's a whole bunch of other times when your pleasure center is firing. But when we are answering a question where we are providing our own personal perspective on something we know, we are on a high, literally. So back to your original question, when do you bring up yourself? That's in step 3. Once you know what's important to the other person and you've allowed them to be up on a pedestal to share their own personal perspective, where they're just on a high sharing where they want to take their family, what their hopes and dreams are around their house, what they'd like to do with their business, why they'd like to relocate to another house and sell another city and relocate and sell this house. When they are providing their personal perspective, once you can paraphrase back to them what's important to them, that's when step 3 happens, when you talk about yourself, because now you're going to talk about your expertise using their words that they were just on a high telling you about. When you're using their words to talk about your services, it's going to land perfectly. When you use your words to talk about your services, they feel sold to, and people hate to be sold to, but they love to buy. So does that make sense? Step 1, write down your people. Totally. Step 2, listen and learn. Step 3, then talk about yourself using their words.
I love that. And what about timeline wise, right? Like, how do you manage that timeline of creating the relationship, deepening it, and then going into the place of, like, let's just put it into the application, right? Like, so you begin to learn something about this other person, right? And, they're super, you both connect around the fact that you both like pickleball. You're giving them the latest techniques of the new ball spin and pickleball. And then you start to get into the place where there's actually this house that's about to hit the market, and there's a perfect spot for a pickleball. They have 2 kids, right? So you're actually like, oh my God, I know they might not be in the market, but this is perfect for that person. Do you go right at, like, how do you manage that timeline? Like, what would you suggest there, Mo?
Well, I want to get your and Bunnell's thoughts on this, but generally, back to the mantra of we hate to be sold to, but we love to buy. So in this case, buying could be a home, but it can also be buying your services as a real estate agent. In this case, it's a home. As soon as you're adding value because you know what's important to them, that's the time to move in. So if it popped in your mind that there's this potential home on the market that would be perfect based on all the stuff you just shared, Chris, then a great phrase to open that up with, real estate agents, if you're hesitant at all, a great phrase to open that up with is would it be helpful if? That is a wonderful way to convert from relationship to commercial. It says, I care about you. You are in control. You're the one buying. I'm not selling. So that what you might say is you bump into them at the supermarket and you're chit-chatting and they mention something about the pickleball thing again. You're like, oh my gosh, I didn't think about it. But would it be helpful if I told you about a property that I think is going to be coming on the market that would be there's a perfect spot for a pickleball court in the back, and it would have that extra bedroom for Junior that you told me about that you wanted. Well, yeah, I would love that. Now they're in control. They're the one that said yes, and now you've converted from relationship to commercial conversations, and in a way, they chose to do it. If it makes sense.
And Mo, one of the things that I love about what you're saying is, coming off of the kickoff with Bunnell's team, as we went in and talked about how awesome Brokering Billions is and how everyone needs to listen to the podcast. But yeah, one of the tactics that I got into was just, understanding that creating relationships is easy. It's sustaining them and deepening them that's so difficult. And tactically speaking, the most effective way that I've personally seen this work is with a video text message. And so for those 10 people, for those listeners, or 20 people, when you send a video text message, just 30 seconds long, just in the general text message app on your phones, you're going to be surprised. You're going to have 100% response rate. And a lot of times, even uncomfortable people will video text message you back, right? And so it's, I think, tactically following your script here, a really nice way to use this time to really deepen these, super important relationships around us that we otherwise probably would have neglected.
Yeah, no, that's huge. I want to dive into some real estate stuff, right? So Mo's helped me with my team and the importance of building a team for scale, right? What pieces of the process and roles have you found, you need to own, and what has been imperative that you delegate, to reach the top of your level? And you've helped me figure out, all right, but no, you're really good at this, you suck at this, and the importance of delegation and these type of things. You've been really, really great with all of our agents here at Ansley to help uncover these traits that they're good at and what they could delegate, and the importance of having scale with a team.
Yep. Oh, I love that. Well, I think I think we can learn a lot from sports here. Sometimes sports analogies are overdone, but I think this is one where it really does make sense. Where different people that play the different positions in any sport we pick, they all have really different roles. In American football, the quarterback really, you don't want somebody who's 370 pounds in slow moving as your quarterback. You want them at center, but somebody who can throw, that can see the play unfolding, that can orchestrate team dynamics, that's your quarterback. And then you've got coaches and everybody else. So I think a simple way to think about this in the context of answering your question, Bunnell, is you don't have to play every role. And I think sometimes I think a lot of times people limit themselves because they try to do everything. They try to be the center, the quarterback, the left guard, the coach, the offensive coordinator, the physician, the trainer. Like, you can't do everything. Right. So the best thing you can do is figure out, what are you really good at and what do you like? And how the heck can you get rid of everything else? And a really simple construct is that HBDI model we talked about before: analytical, relational, big idea or strategy, and process. There are 4 ways of thinking. And everybody listening or watching right now probably says, oh man, I love this one, I hate that one. Well, outsource it to somebody. Hire somebody to do those things. If you don't like process and all the details of getting the house tidied up before the closing, outsource that. If you love that, but you don't like the analytical part, outsource that. But figure out which elements, basically break down the real estate business as you have it right now into a series of processes and roles, and then just write down there on a 1 to 5 scale. 5 is you love it, 1's you hate it. and as fast as you can, hire somebody else to do all the ones and twos.
So I'll give you, listeners, a sneak preview. One of the things that you helped inspire, actually, Mo, which you probably don't know about, is we are almost done with creating a real estate quiz. That'll be a free tool for real estate agents to figure out, following a similar construct as what you're talking about, but what are you good at? And then what are you not so good at that you need to start delegating? So that'll be coming up. But Mo, you've got some amazing tools in your arsenal. And for those listening that want to take action on more of this, is there anywhere that they can go to that might be free, that they can kind of get to know this stuff a little bit better?
We do. We have a course on, we call sales or client acquisition business development, or BD for short. And we've got a course called BD Habits. And it actually has a form for that Protomoy list that actually lets you write down the people that are most important and track them on the path from I haven't met them yet to they are actively helping me grow my business. We call that a raving fan. We got 7 steps to it. So the form's all there. That's managing relationships. We've got a form for how to manage your opportunities. We've got a form for how to manage yourself to stay on top of the growth activities while you're busy getting to closing and all those things. And it's all at a really simple place to remember, bdhabits.com. So it's a course on BD habits, and it's at bdhabits.com. And it's got 6 different little micro lessons. There's no charge to it. It's got videos for me teaching some of the stuff we covered today, and a whole lot more we didn't have time to cover. Is no charge to it, and it's at bdhabits.com.
That's amazing. I love it. Offering value out of the gates.
I love that. Hey, one more, Mo. What are 3 most important things that listeners can start doing today just to improve their network?
Thing one, Dr. Marissa King is one of my favorite researchers. She's at Yale. She's moving to Penn now. I'm giving a speech with her in a couple weeks in Canada. She is an expert on social relationships. And one of the number one things she talks about that you can deepen a relationship is asking for help. So think about this. Say you're going to go to this network of folks who are your potential fans, your strategic partners, your multipliers, Bunnell, as you call them. Build out a 1-page plan for your business, everybody. Take it to those top people that you write down on your Protomoy list and say, hey, I value your opinion. Can I get your advice on my plan? What Marissa found in her research is that asking for help, in this case, asking for advice, a subset of asking for help, is one of the biggest relationship deepeners of all time. Because what happens is the person gives you great ideas and they become enrolled in your future success. So they start introducing you to other people, taking top of mind. They want to hear how you did.
It hits that authenticity piece too, right? Right. When you're asking someone for help, you're saying like, I'm not very good at this, or I'm struggling in this area.
Well, or that I'm good and I want to get better. I think of you when we had that overnight at the
homeless shelter, right?
Yeah, the homeless shelter. Like we wrote down plans for the next year. I was asking for your advice on mine. You were asking for my advice on yours. We had 2 other people there. So we had already reached a pretty high level of performance. We weren't happy with that. We wanted to get better. So it can work both ways, Chris. It can work, hey, I'm just starting out. It can work like I'm already 99th percentile, but I want to be 99.9. So that's thing one is build out a 1-page plan and ask for advice from a whole bunch of people. You'll be unbelievably amazed at how people come out of the woodwork to help you even more when you ask for their advice. Chris, awesome. I saw you had a question.
No, that's one. I want to know what 2 is.
That's one. Yeah. So the second thing I'd say is we call this the MIT process. This is actually in that free course, a lot more detail on it we can cover here. But the MIT process. MIT stands for most important things. The number one thing you can do is focus. So once a week, same time every week, block off 15 minutes on your calendar. I'm a Friday at 3 o'clock person. You can be Saturday morning, Tuesday at 10, doesn't matter. But every week you block off 15 minutes and you say, this is my MIT time, my most important thing time. And what you do is you pick 3 things the next week that you're going to do that's going to help you grow your book of business. 3 doesn't sound like many, but what we found is if people do the 3 things that are the most important, that gets them on a roll. Back to the Seppo Iso Hola research on start small and scale up, and it builds psychological momentum. If you do the 3 most important thing first, you're probably going to do 25. But if you create a list of 25 things to do, you'll do the easiest and you'll do like 7 of them. And you just don't get the momentum that you deserve.
Love it.
So that MIT process takes 15 minutes a week. And all you do is you say, hey, what 3 things am I on the hook for next week that's going to help me grow my book of business? And then in week 2, you say, hey, did I do the 3 things in week 1? And you just start to get on this roll that goes crazy. But
and agents, why that's important is because we spend our time on the treadmill all the time, and we do what's most urgent, right? And that's returning an email, returning a phone call.
Reactive.
So, reactive. So these are 3 things that you do to help continue a gain on everything else that you're doing. So having that time that is separate from the stuff that you do on the treadmill, if you will, returning phone calls, emails, these type of things, that's the really, really important stuff to grow, right? And that it goes back to, everything that you've done with your grow big system, right?
Yep.
Mo, I mean, which is pretty neat. So you got one more, Mo, right?
Yeah. So the last thing I'd say, and I saved this for last because I think people should do the first 2 first, but if they do the first 2, the third thing I'd recommend is create scalable thought leadership. Scalable thought leadership. That is the top of the T, capital T we talked about. If you can find a way to add value at scale, training videos on YouTube, a podcast like you're doing here, something where you create it once and it grows in value and scale and impact over time. Anything on the web that's recorded does that, as opposed to speaking at the Rotary where, 2 weeks later, everybody forgot about you. Do things that grow and impact over time, scalable thought leadership. So it's not a pitch, you're adding value in some way. That starts to compound over time, week over week over week. And that's what blows the doors off. And I think that's
record on your phone, right? Like, I mean, that's what people, writing articles is hard, right? Editing articles is hard. But it's not when something happens in the news that's related to the current interest rate, have an opinion on it and just record it quickly, right? Like just start. I love that, Mo.
Yeah, scalable thought leadership. Really, and what's beautiful about it is you never know how much it gets amplified, but there's some factor it gets amplified. Sure. So if you have so many likes or so many whatevers, depending on how you do it, there's 10 times that many people that shared it to somebody else on the couch and said, hey, look at this. You never see the metric, but somebody shared that to their buddy at the dinner table or to their spouse on the couch. There's a lot more. Scalable thought leadership impacts things a lot more than people think, because the metrics show a lot, but it doesn't show how much it really does. And if you do it week over week over week over week, it builds over time.
I love it, Mo. I feel like we could talk for hours. Unfortunately, we all have attention spans like Bunnell. We don't want to keep going and going. But like, seriously, this has been absolutely amazing. And even like from my perspective, I feel like I'm walking away with some new tactics.
Me too, always.
My own
you're
arsenal.
good.
So
yeah.
We thank you so much for joining us. Is there anywhere that people outside of the link you already mentioned, which we will make sure is listed in the notes below, is there anywhere else that people can reach out to you that you want to give a quick shout out to?
Yeah, that'd be great. Well, what's great about the bdhabits.com, if people sign up for that, they'll get the series of videos and they can reply. They come on email, so they can just reply and ask me a question. Like I'd be happy to do it. So perfect. I'd probably steer everybody back to bdhabits.com because that accomplishes both things with one action.
Awesome. Well,
this has been amazing. Mo, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mo. You rock.